notably, of course, Gabriel Tard, have attempted to study a chimera in the biological sense of the word, obtained by the unfortunate fusion of the political and of the organizational mode of existence. The creation of a path that links the part and the whole is a crucial feature of a political regime, what I've called for this reason the circle of representation. Are we one or many? Is the whole more than the sum of its parts? Should the whole really consist of its constituents? Those are some of the essential questions for making the body politic continue its existence one more turn. Here, too, I agree, there is a hiatus to be overcome, a gigantic gap that the whole of political philosophy has tried to fathom. But no matter how important, those questions have nothing to do with the gap over which the organizational regime has to learn how to jump. The confusion is clearly detectable by a little shift from Greek to Latin. The political circle that was called autophous in Plato, has become sui generis in Durkheim's hand. The two expressions are almost exactly the same, except one, the first, means the political question of bringing the parts into a whole, while the other designate the mystifying invention of a social entity above and beyond its ingredients. While the first clarify the organizational regime, while the first clarifies the political mode of existence, the second obfuscates the organizational regime. In an organization, there is never any sui generis corporate body. And that's exactly where the difficulty lies. Organization, in other words, and here again, this is exactly what Barbara said this morning, remains always immanent to the instrumentarium that brings them into existence. This is why I call them flat. That the two processes can be distinguished may be exemplified by the crisis that make us bow to the birth of Emilio Bootme. For once, it's not political at all. There's no question inside the board that we are a coherent bunch of co-directors, that we agree on who is the leader, and that we belong to the same ensemble. In brief, we know what is the assemblage that is designated when we say we should, we don't know, we have to decide, and so on. And yet, while the composition of the we is not in question, we have no idea of what we should do. In other words, the political assemblage is not in crisis, while the organization is very much in trouble. Proof enough that the two regimes can and should be distinguished. Which doesn't mean, of course, that the organizational crisis, were it to last, would not begin to corrode the political as well. But that's not the case. I want to argue that it's not because both regimes are concerned with complex question of composition that they should be mixed. By inventing the notion of a society on one hand and on individuals on the other, and then wondering how the two are related, social theorists have made very difficult the detection of a precise path through which organizations trace their zigzagging patterns. Their moral and political obsession for the composition of a whole has blinded them to the organizations. The shadow cast by the body politic, that at least is my view, has made monsters of institutions. To be sure, organizations are odd enough, but there is no need to render them monstrous. So, how can we detect the oddity without additional mystery? First, by putting aside the sociological artifact. An organization is not and will never be a superorganism, a golem, as Barbara says, a whole superior to its part, a corporate body, a moral entity. The addition of any concept of society to the inquiry will only blind us. Second, by accepting the metaphysical evidence that no entity lasts by having a substance on which to rely, on foundation on which to rest, or an essence to carry it further in time. When, during another episode, our unquestioned leaders makes a moving speech about the school that we have inherited and the new school that we should be ready to deliver to the hands of our successors once our transitory bodies will have turned as much into dust as Emilio Bootme's bones, we know perfectly well that what is passing from our present team to the next is not like the baton of a relay race, but rather like the whole race. Stadium, television rights, car lots, illicit drugs, and hot dogs included. What passes is not a stable fixture, but a whole moving assemblage of disconnected parts. There is nothing above us, the superorganism. There is nothing below us, the foundation. There is nothing before us, the blueprint, the DNA. And there is nothing after us, the goal we pursue in the dark. And yet, there is something that subsists, the school to which we are attached, and whose precise trajectory we scrutinize with agonizing anxiety. This is the oddity that we should consider without adding to it any other parasitical transcendence. There is no transcendence, the whole, except this tiny, tiny transcendence, namely this tiny gap we managed to overcome this morning in the council room. By contrast with its mystical version, the chimera of a political fuse with the organizational mode, this is what I would like to call the secular definition of an organizing. How can it be pursued? Naturally, social scientists are no fools, I know. They have detected in organizational trajectory a real enough phenomenon that has been transformed in an artifact only because of its passing resemblance with that of achieving the body politic, the circle. This real enough phenomenon is that we live at different moments under and at sometimes above what I would call a script. A script is a set of goal-oriented instructions that delegate to some other actors more or less specific tasks depending on those actors' competence. A script also includes, and this is a crucial feature, deadlines at which it will be reconsidered. Although the word script has been lifted out of literary theory, we should be careful not to lose sight of the originality of the organizational sense of a script. When you read a novel, you might be carried along with the character, identification, suspension of disbelief, etc. But you are never witnessing the brutal transformation that is so common in an act of organizational writing. Suddenly, instead of reading the script, you are instructed by the script to do something. To be sure, that exists in some pathological cases, even in novel, as when a kid reading about Batman feels instructed to become Batman and jump by the window. But in organization, this is not pathological. This reversal of authorship is most mundane. A script is what you write about, but then what is, so to speak, writing you. Example of a script can be very trivial, such as the duration for my talk, which we settle with the chairman of this session. As long as this talk is not finished, we both live under the script. But when we assembled earlier this morning to discuss the organization of a conference, the script was clearly under us, as something we could fit us somewhat. The crisis in the council room revealed a much more elaborated script, since the whole century of a school existence had to be opened and patched up before living under it, until, of course, the next crisis forced us into another life and death decision. Still, no matter how complex, when we were sounding Emilio Bootme's silent oracles,